Happy 64th Independence to Nigeria. So today I'll be doing something unusual to what I have been known to be doing. So I'm going to be teaching today. So we're going to look at this together. So I stumbled upon something and I wanted to have a discussion on it before we could embark into the practical aspect of it, all right? So what is the Pareto principle? So it's one of the things we'll be discussing today, the Pareto principle. So the Pareto principle states that for many outcome, roughly 80%, of which consequence comes from 20% of the cause. So you have an outcome, you have a total case of 100%. So of this total percent, the causes of it is just 20% that result to that 80% damages. That is what this Pareto principle means. So in other words, a small percentage of causes having an outsized or oversized effect. This concept is important to understand because it can help you identify which initiatives to prioritize so that you can make the most impact. So the idea of it is just for you to be able to make the most impact of all your decisions. All right. So, of essence, where does this Pareto principle come from? Like, where does it come from? We'll be looking at it. All right. So, the Pareto principle was actually developed by an Italian economist. His name is Vilfredo Pareto in 1896. So, which means the Pareto was actually his name. So it was named, the principle was named after him. So this principle came to be in 1896. Yeah. So Vilfredo Pareto developed this principle. Now, let's look at what was going through his mind while this whole thing came about. So that brings us to Pareto observation. Now, Pareto observed that 80% of the land in Italy, as of that time, when he was, when he was thinking, his brain was working. Now, 80% of the land in Italy was owned by only 20% of the total population. He also witnessed this happening with plants in his garden. 20% of his plants were bearing 80% of the fruits. So this relationship is best mathematically described as a power law distribution between two quantities in which a change in one quantity results in a relevant change in the other quantity. So the phenomenon also goes by a couple of different names. Now, the phenomenon goes by Pareto principle. It also goes by 80-20 rules, which is the most common among them all. And then the law of vital few, then principle of factor sparsity. So these are the common names that this phenomenon of the Pareto observation is all about. Like, it has four major names that this has been called. All right. So let's go back to the most common among them, which is the 80-20. So the 80-20 rule is not a formal mathematical equation, but more a generalized phenomenon that can be observed in economics, in business, in time management, event sport, geoinformation, data science, just name them. So general example of this Pareto principle, 20% of a plant contain 80% of the fruit. Remember, we had of his thoughts, his observations when he came about this whole thing. He said 20% of his plants were the one bearing 80% of the fruit. And then 80% of a company's profit comes from 20% of its client. So you have 100% client, but the bulk profit comes from just 20% of it. And then lastly, 20% of players result in 80% of point score. So this phenomenon, just for you to understand like what this whole is all about, all right? That's why we're going through it. So how can you use these 80-20 rules? Now, while the 80-20 rules applies to almost every industry, the Pareto principle is commonly used in business and economics. This is because the 80-20 rule is helpful in determining where you can focus your effort to maximize your output. The basis of the Pareto principle states that 80% of result come from 20% of action. If you have any kind of work that can be segmented into smaller portions, the Pareto principle can help you identify what part of that very work is the most influential. Few examples of how to use the tool in practice. One of it is productivity. Now you can use the 80-20 rules to prioritize the tasks that you need to get done during the day. The idea is that out of your entire task list, completing 20% of those tasks will result in 80% of the impact you can create for that day. So in order to get the most impact done, identify which tasks have the most impact for your team and focus on those tasks for the day. That's all that this is saying in terms of productivity. As far as productivity is concerned, applying 80-20 rules, this is all that you need. Decision making. The Pareto principle can help you to make the best decision during the problem solving process. When there are many different causes to the problem, the Pareto principle can help you prioritize solutions. Now imagine you work at an e-commerce company. You take a look at 100 of your most recent customer service complaints and notice that the bulk of the complaints come from the fact that customers are receiving damaged products. So your team calculates the amount of refunds given for your damaged products and find that approximately 80% of refunds given were for damaged products. Your company wants to avoid processing refund for broken product, so you make this problem a priority solution. So now the 80-20 analysis. Now we're still on the example in practice. So in crime now, so crime analysts use this 80-20 analysis or tools to identify the small number of locations that are disproportionately responsible for a majority of incidents. For example, 80% of calls for service comes from only 20% of locations. By identifying these repeat problems, law enforcement agencies can reduce overall incidence volumes by creating specific strategies to handle those locations that are disproportionately responsible for the problem. So what are now the benefits of the Pareto principle? And the biggest advantage of using the Pareto principle is that you can create the maximum amount of impact with the least amount of work. This can allow your team to work more effectively, efficiently, and stay focused on specific initiatives. So the 80-20 rules can help you matrix can help your metrics increase in less time simply by prioritizing initiatives in the right order. So other benefits of the Pareto principle. Now you clear priorities both for you and your team. You have to have a clear priorities. Now increase daily productivity, ability to portion your work into manageable segments, and more focused strategy provide feedback. Disadvantage of using the 80-20 rules. There's a common misinterpretation of the principle that with 20% of effort, you can achieve 80% of the result. This is not necessarily the case. The 20 and 80 number don't refer to the amount of effort you are putting in, but the causes and consequences you are working on. The goal is not to minimize the amount of effort, but to focus your effort on specific portion of work to create a bigger impact. You still have to put more 100% of effort into that 20% of focus to achieve 80% of results. Disadvantage continues. Another downside of the 80-20 rules is that sometimes team members can get too focused and lose sight on other tasks. So if you only focus on the tasks, the important tasks, and put aside the less important tasks like emails and other correspondence things that can get lost, the challenge is finding the right balance of using the 80-20 rules and getting through the rest of your tasks, even if they don't result in 80% of result. To combat this, you can use techniques like time boxing or the getting things done GTD method. So thank you for going through this with me. I'm Shama Kirima, and then you can contact me on the email you are seeing on your screen. I represent the Allied Geospatial Information Services here in Nigeria. So I will see you in the next video where we're going to start putting these 80-20 rules in practical or in practice. But we're going to be using ArcGIS Pro to practicalize this tool. So the next video coming up after this one will be a video on 80-20 analysis. So this analysis can be done on crime, on call center, on a lot of things. So I will sort out data for few of such examples so that we can use them and then practicalize them, and maybe we will have a better understanding. So I decided to add theory to it so that it's cool. It doesn't really look as if it's geomatics inclined, but I believe by the time we practicalize, then you will be able to correlate everything. The whole of this idea is statistical interpretations. So, and we will use the geostatistics. So basically, I believe this will give you an overview and an idea of the next video coming up. So thank you for watching. Thank you for staying tuned. If this have more values for you or adds any value at all for you, do not forget to subscribe, like, share, and tell somebody about this channel. Thank you, and I'll see you in the next video.